He came with the storm. An outcast, a Lakota man named Wakasa, stepped into the mouth of the wind with a blood-slicked infant clutched to his chest, wrapped in tattered cloth that couldn't keep out the cold. December 1879 had turned Ida Rosita, a forgotten patch of wood and grit in the southwestern frontier, into a place that bit through bone. The wind battered Main Street like a restless spirit, shoving dust between floorboards and slapping against the windows of the Widow's Rest Saloon with the fury of something ancient and unsettled. Inside, the light was dim and thick with tobacco smoke, the silence interrupted only by the soft clink of glasses and muttered conversations. Then the door swung open, and silence swallowed the room whole. Wakasa stood framed in the doorway, sand twisting around him, his skin red with dust, his eyes unreadable, his arms cradling the only thing he had left to protect. He said nothing, made no plea, but the tension in the room coiled tight. A broad man near the card table rose, fists clenched and mouth curled in hate. "We don't serve redskins," he growled, voice slicing through the air, followed by a spit of venom to the floor. Another slammed the glass down, the saloon now vibrating with the kind of threat that comes before violence. But Wakasa stood firm, unmoving. "I'm not asking for shelter," he said quietly, yet every man heard him. "This child, she needs to live." His voice didn't waver. His eyes didn't lower. He was a man carrying a challenge, not a burden. The infant stirred, her tiny form trembling from cold and fear. From behind the bar, Clara June watched. A widow dressed in black, only 27, but marked by sorrow deeper than her years. She'd lost her son the previous spring, taken by a fever that no prayer could reverse. The weight of that memory sat in her chest like stone. She saw the baby's face and something within her cracked, not broken, but opening. Quietly, she stepped out from behind the bar, her boots soft on the uneven floor. She didn't look at the crowd when she spoke, only at the child. "Come in," she said, her voice taut with warmth, "before the wind takes what's left of you." The room erupted, shouts, threats, a bottle hurled against the wall. But Clara didn't flinch. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bar like a lifeline. "If the Lord let me be a mother once," she said, voice trembling, "he can do it again." That line split the air like a bell rung at midnight. Wakasa moved then, each step deliberate, the storm closing behind him. He didn't offer thanks, only nodded as Clara turned and led him to back a saloon, through whispers, glares, and fists clenched in fury. The door slammed shut behind them, muting the storm's howl to a bitter hiss. In the saloon's narrow back room, the air was warmer, a fire sputtering low on the hearth. Clara fetched an old wool blanket she hadn't touched since her son's death and wrapped the baby in it, setting her gently on a cot. Wakasa knelt beside her, wiping the dried blood from her forehead with cloth soaked in warm water. "Her name is Hope," he said after long silence, his voice barely above the crackling of the flames. "Her mother was white, a good woman, helped me when I didn't deserve it." Clara stood in the doorway, arms folded tight. "And her father?" she asked. Wakasa's jaw tensed. "Apache," he murmured. "The man who raised me. Saved me from slavers when I was a boy. He taught me to live with honor. But when they were both killed, I took their child. My tribe called her an abomination, said I had betrayed blood and tradition. They told me to leave, or they'd take her and burn her." Clara stepped further in, her fingers twitching with old grief. She added another log to the fire, watching sparks rise like ghosts. "I lost my son to fever," she said quietly. "He was 6. My husband drank himself into rage and found a bullet before winter ended. I buried them both under the same hill." Wakasa looked at her then, not in pity, but in mutual recognition. Not strangers now, but two people marked by loss, carrying the ashes of what they once loved. The wind outside still whispered against the boards like a snake refusing to leave, but inside that small room, there was breath, warmth, and for the first time in a long while, for both of them, something that might become belonging. "I serve what kills men," Clara said, her voice heavy with self-contempt, but also with clarity honed by grief. "But it's not the whiskey that ruins them. It's the emptiness they carry long before they walk through those doors." Her gaze drifted down to the sleeping infant, her features softened by the flicker of firelight. This town will break her too, grind her into dust like it does everything tender, unless we stop it. Wakasa nodded once, his answer firm in its simplicity. Then we won't let it. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them, a low whisper of warmth in a room still thick with shadows. The wind outside had quieted, but the heaviness in the air remained, clinging to their backs like old burdens. Clara rose and crossed the cot, her fingers brushing the baby's tiny hand. So impossibly small, perfect, untouched by the cruelty of the world just yet. "You said her name is Hope?" she murmured, and Wakasa gave a faint smile, one almost lost in the stubble of his tired face. "She is the only thing I kept when everything else was taken from me." Clara looked down at him, truly seeing him now. Not the outcast the town had named him, but a man who defied the odds and carried life through ruin. "You didn't have to come here." His voice was calm. "I had nowhere else to go." She studied the lines of his face, warmed by sun, marked by hardship, but not hardened. No malice there, only quiet endurance. A man who had chosen to carry a child no one else wanted into a world that seemed to want neither of them. "You are not what they say," she whispered, and he glanced up. "And neither are you," he said. She nodded, almost to herself. "No, not tonight. Tonight, I remembered I used to be a mother, and I think I'd like to be one again." Something flickered in Wakasa's eyes then. Something close to hope, cautious but alive. Clara moved to the kettle and poured 2 cups of warm water steeped with crushed herbs in silence. She handed him one with steady hands. "You'll stay here in the back. No one needs to know, and I won't ask questions you're not ready to answer." He accepted it with a small bow of his head. "And I won't give you cause to regret it." They drank slowly, steam rising between them like breath after a long drowning. Hope slept soundly, curled beneath the wool blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling like a fragile promise. Outside, the world leaned in, still cold, still broken. But within the small room, something new had begun, something warm and human and stubborn enough to live. The next morning dawned in cold dust and soft gray light. The wind had stilled, but it moaned low through the broken slats of Santa Rosita, dragging its sorrow across the shingles like a morning song. Behind the saloon's wool curtain, life had quietly decided to begin again. Wakasa asked for no tools, gave no speeches, simply rose early and began working. At first light, before the town stirred, he climbed the leaning awning with a hammer and canvas, patching holes with fenced wood and memory. He swept broken glass from behind the saloon, hauled grain sacks from the dark cellar, and res-tacked them without a sound. And then, wordless, he planted a slender Lakota staff near the rear door, its sun-bleached cloth and wind-worn feathers stirring slightly in morning air, a silent decoration. This place is watched over now. Clara pretended not to notice, but she did. She watched everything. The way he moved, quiet, purposeful, never asking, never intruding. Each morning, she fed Hope, swept the porch, and found something tucked beside the bowl she left for him. A sprig of wild mint, fresh and sharp, no roses or grand flourishes, just a simple offering. She never asked why. She would crush the mint gently and breathe its scent in deep, letting it settle in her chest. Hope, stronger by the day, had begun to settle into the rhythm of the saloon, as if she'd always belonged. She giggled when the old jingle bells over the back doorway chimed in a breeze, waved her little hands, then curled into Clara's shawl and slept with a piece of the utterly loved. During those quiet hours when light crept soft across the floorboards, Clara began to sew again, hand stiff at first, but remembering. The linen she pulled from her cedar chest still smelled faintly of lavender and sorrow. She made a dress, white, with a red band at the waist, and at the hem she stitched roses, 12 in all, one for each month Hope had survived. Over the heart, she embroidered the 4 winds of Lakota in colors pulled from the earth, ash gray, berry red, grassy green, and sun-faded brown. Just above that, she stitched a tiny cross, not bold, just quietly there. Remembrance, not decoration. The dress wasn't perfect. Some lines curved unevenly, but it was theirs, a tender map of grief turned into care. That evening, As dusk settled like breath on the windows, Wakasa returned from the river, where he always whispered his prayers. When he stepped to the back door, he saw it, the dress folded beside the baby, soft and waiting. Clara said nothing. She ladled stew with her usual silence. He looked from Hope to the dress, then to her, and in that brief glance something passed. Not peace, not quite gratitude, but understanding. A shared recognition of loss survived, of something rebuilt with hands instead of words. That night, Hope slept cradled in Clara's arms. And beside the empty bowl, Wakasa left another sprig of mint, this one kiss with beads of dew, still wet with the memory of morning. Before Clara blew out the lantern, she slipped a small sprig of mint deep into the fold of the dress she had sewn, tucked near the heart, hidden where no one would find it. Because some things are not meant to be explained. They are meant to be held, guarded, kept. The wind did not whisper that night. It roared, dragged its claws through the streets of Santa Rosita, peeled paint from walls, slammed doors until their hinges screamed, and swallowed the town in layers of furious dust. The widow's rest groaned with each gust, the windows trembling like frightened lungs. But even louder than the storm was the sharp, raw cry of a child. Hope's fever burned like a brand beneath her skin, her chest heaving in shallow bursts, her limbs twitching in a desperate fight against something unseen. Clara sat by the stove, rocking her in the worn chair that once cradled her own son. Her lips cracked from heat and prayer, voice broken as she hummed fragments of old hymns through trembling breath. "She's burning," she whispered, wiping Hope's damp brow with trembling fingers. "She's on fire." She tried everything. Cool cloths, spoonfuls of water, a weak broth mixed with desperation, but nothing soothed the child's agony. Her eyes fluttered back, lashes flickering like torn silk, and her small body writhed as the fever raged on. Outside, the wind screamed without pause. Inside, Clara's heart raced, louder than any storm. When morning came, meaner than night, gritty and sharp, Clara wrapped herself in a thick shawl and stepped out into the storm, sand stinging her face like fire. She ran across the dying street to the druggist's porch and pounded the door with bare fists. "Please," she begged, "I need medicine. The baby's sick. She's burning up." The man cracked the door, eyes narrow, mouth curled. "That the one from the Savage?" Clara stiffened. "She's a baby," she said, fierce now. "Just a baby." He looked her over slowly, then sneered. "Let her die quick. Better that than grow up half wild." Her eyes flashed, but her voice stayed cold. "What kind of Christian talks like that?" He sneered again. "One who serves decent folk. Now get." The door slammed. Clara stood motionless as the storm whipped around her, then turned and walked back, shaking hollow-handed, rage and helplessness curling in her gut. At the saloon's back door, Wakasa stood waiting. He didn't ask, he already knew. "She needs fever root. Wormwood, too," Clara said, voice flat with fury. "But they won't sell it. Not for her." He nodded once, then turned without a word, moving with the quiet resolve of a man who had long since stopped expecting kindness. He saddled his horse, packed his canteen and blanket. "Where are you going?" Clara called, wind tugging at her words. He looked back, to find someone with a heart. Then he was gone, riding east into a storm that clawed and howled like a beast. The parson's cabin lay 15 miles away, hidden in the broken hills beyond the edge of the map. The storm rose against him with every step, sand scouring his skin, tearing at his coat, blinding his path until the world became nothing but motion and grit. The horse faltered, stumbled, nearly fell, but Wakasa urged it on, one word at a time, one prayerless breath after another. When he finally reached the cabin, his face was raw, his eyes red-rimmed with dust and desperation. He knocked once, firm but not frantic. The old parson opened the door and stared, no surprise in his eyes, only the quiet gaze of a man who had seen too much to question miracles or ghosts. "She's dying," Wakasa said, voice hoarse but unshaken, "and I cannot lose her." The preacher didn't speak. He stepped back, gave him a small cloth pouch of herbs, a jar of tincture that smelled of earth and hope, and placed a weathered hand on his shoulder. "She'll need prayer, too." Wakasa looked down. "I gave her all mine," he said. "Now she needs yours." The ride back was worse than the journey out. The wind didn't just blow. It screamed, howled like a wounded beast chasing him across the plains. Sand cut across his face in sheets, and the world turned to shifting gray. In the chaos, the horse stumbled, one hoof caught in a deep rut hidden beneath the storm's rage. It threw Wakasa violently. He hit the ground hard, ribs snapping like dry twigs beneath him. Pain tore through his side, but his first breath was not for himself. It was for the bundle tucked tight beneath his coat. Hope, wrapped in cloth, barely stirring, her breath faint. He crawled to her, arm dragging uselessly, and pulled her close again, folding his battered frame over hers. His back took the wind, his blood soaked into the sand, and his body became the only shelter left to give. Hours later, when Clara threw open the saloon door, she saw him crumpled there, a half-buried figure shaped like defiance and devotion. "Wakasa!" she shouted, running barefoot into the storm. He looked up, barely, lips cracked and pale, one breath from darkness. Hope whimpered softly against his chest. "You damn fool," Clara whispered, tears hot on her face as she cradled them both. "You'll die." His eyes fluttered open. "Not yet." "Why?" she sobbed, clutching his blood-soaked coat. "She's not even yours." His voice was a wind, thin and almost gone. "But she's mine to protect." Then he collapsed. Clara dragged them both inside, bolted the door behind her, and got to work with the desperation of a woman who had already lost too much. She boiled water, crushed herbs with shaking hands, whispered old prayers she had long forgotten how to believe. She spooned bitter tincture into Hope's mouth, drop by drop, until the baby drank. She cleaned Wakasa's wounds, wrapped his ribs, wiped his brow with the same cloth she had once used on her own child. And as the wind outside began to die, Hope's fever broke. Her breathing steadied. Her tiny body softened with sleep. And there, beside the fire, lay a man who had no home, no tribe, no name left to honor, yet had given everything to protect what mattered most. In that hush, Clara sat beside them and knew with clarity she had never known before. This was family, not by blood, but by choice, by fire, by fight. But peace never lingered in Santa Rosita. The sky cracked with heat, and the air hung with a tension that had nothing to do with weather. Rumors had traveled faster than truth, faster than justice. By mid-morning, the dust of the last storm had not even settled, and already a new one arrived, this time on boots and rifles. Soldiers from Fort Eastland, 3 in uniform, 2 armed deputies, and 1 Lakota elder, his braid threaded with feathers from clans who still spoke of shame and pride, as if they were brothers. They rode in on word of a renegade native traveling with a child of mixed blood, accused of abduction, possibly murder. It didn't matter that no one could say where she came from or who she was for certain. The story had already been decided. Wakasa felt the danger before he heard it, deep in his ribs, in the ache that always preceded violence. But he did not run. He sat at the back of the saloon beneath the creaking eaves, Hope cradled in one arm, a wooden cup pressed gently to her lips. She drank slowly, eyes blinking in the morning light. "Good girl," he whispered. Then the saloon doors slammed open. Dust followed the boots of 6 men, the soldiers' coats streaked with travel, hats low, rifles steady. The Lakota elder stepped forward, eyes like flint. "Step away from the child," the lead soldier ordered. Wakasa rose slowly, placing himself between them and the baby. "She is not what you've been told." The elder's voice cut sharper. "She is not yours. You dishonor both bloods by keeping her." Wakasa's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Clara stepped from the kitchen, apron still in her hands. She saw the rifles, the narrowed eyes, the absence of mercy, and knew that fear was now useless. "What's this about?" she asked. The deputy's voice was cold. "The girl was taken from a disputed camp. There's talk of murder." Wakasa answered plainly. "Her mother died in a raid. Her father died protecting her. I pulled her from the fire. I have not hidden the truth." The soldier stepped forward. "And the child now?" Clara met his gaze without flinching. "She's not here." The deputy moved to pass her, and Clara stepped into his path. "She's mine." Silence fell like ash. "My blood cries for her now," she said louder. "I feed her. I hold her. I pray over her. She calls for me when she's scared. Tell me what else it takes to be a mother. The elder scoffed. She belongs to no one. Clara turned to Wakasa, eyes searching his. Does she? Wakasa, battered, bruised, ribs bound, looked back with nothing left to give but truth. She belongs to herself, he said. But she's alive because of you. Then that's enough, Clara said, steady as stone, though her heart trembled beneath her ribs. The deputy's jaw clenched as his hand shifted toward his rifle. Stand down, lady. We got orders. Wakasa, without panic, handed the wooden cup back to Clara and stepped forward, his hands raised in peace, his voice calm but firm. Let me speak to the elder, he said. No blood today. The lead soldier glanced at the elder, then gave a small nod. Wakasa moved slowly, every step heavy with old memories and unspoken battles, as if the ground itself might judge his passing. He stopped before the elder, their eyes level, 2 generations shaped by fire and belief. His words came in Lakota, low and even. You once called me traitor for saving her. But what is tradition if it demands the death of a child to honor it? The elder said nothing, his mouth tight with the weight of years. I do not ask a return, Wakasa continued. I ask only to be left in peace. The child is not Apache or Lakota or white. She is human. Her blood is still warm. Silence pressing like dust before rain. Then the elder turned away, his voice clipped and final. This man is no longer one of us. Whatever happens to him, we do not carry it. Wakasa bowed his head once. That is enough. But the deputy wasn't done. We still take him in, he said sharply. Let Judge sort the rest. Clara moved again, this time planting herself fully between the rifles and the man who had become her family. He's under my roof, she said, voice sharp as a snap wire. And unless you've got a warrant signed in ink and blood, you'll leave as you came. The soldier narrowed his eyes. Careful, miss. Clara's voice broke, but her stance did not. I buried a husband and a child. You think I fear losing what's already gone. Just then, from beneath the floorboards, a soft cry pierced the stillness. Hope's voice, thin but alive. The sound froze the room. Wakasa closed his eyes, then met Clara's gaze, his own full of exhaustion and trust. Don't let them take her. Clara's response was a vow. Not while I draw breath. No one moved. Then finally, the officer cursed under his breath, threw a glance at the elder, and motioned to his men. Mount up, he muttered. We'll write the report. Let the papers swallow the truth. And like smoke before rain, they vanished, leaving silence behind. Wakasa sat down slowly, shoulders slack, and finally let the breath escape from his lungs. Clara knelt beside him, arms trembling. What do we do now? She asked. His answer was soft but certain. We keep breathing, until she can walk far enough to do the same. Beneath the boards, the child stopped crying. Afternoon light spilled through the saloon's dusty windows, stretching long and golden across the worn floorboards. The storm had passed days ago now, but its echo lingered, coiled and silent, like a snake waiting in tall grass. Clara stood by the hearth, cradling a tin cup of lukewarm coffee, her eyes flicking between the fire and the cradle beside it. Wassa sat nearby, ribs still wrapped in linen, his gaze fixed on the sleeping bundle that had rewritten both their lives. Hope shifted in her sleep, her breath slow and sure, her tiny fingers curling toward warmth. The knock came just before sundown. Clara opened the door to find Reverend Cyrus Hall standing there, his weathered coat dusty, hat in his hands. His face was older than the last time she'd seen him, lined with years and funerals. But his eyes, those storm-warm blue eyes, held something that looked like regret. I came because you asked, he said quietly, not because the town approves. Clara gave a single nod. That's enough. Inside, his gaze drifted to Wakasa. The Lakota man rose slowly, spine straight, chin steady. The Reverend drew a breath, hesitant. Is it true that you brought this child from Arizona? That the mother was... She was dying, Wakasa said, his voice as quiet as falling ash. Her name was Anna. She was white. The father, Apache. They died protecting her. The Reverend turned to Clara. "And you trust him?" Clara's reply came without pause. "With my life, and with hers." The old man nodded slowly, his eyes falling to the cradle. "Then that is testimony enough." But peace, Clara knew, never lingered long in Santa Rosita. Not in the cracks of its streets, not in the corners of its saloons, and not in the hearts of people who didn't know how to make room for grace.